Imagine trying to build like a state-of-the-art skyscraper,
Okay.
but instead of one master architect, you have 27 different architects.
That sounds like a total nightmare.
Right. And they completely refuse to share their blueprints with each other. They all demand totally different grades of steel, and they all speak different languages.
And you are expected to somehow assemble all of that into a building that can actually withstand a hurricane.
Exactly.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of an industrial and strategic puzzle.
Yeah, and that is exactly the reality of European defense procurement today. But the European Union is, well, they're trying to solve that puzzle.
Right, and they're using a very large carrot to do it.
A massive carrot. So today, we're taking a deep dive into the European Defense Fund, or the EDF. Specifically, the 2026 Call for Proposals for Development Actions.
Yeah.
The EU is putting 422 million euros on the line to fundamentally force its defense industry to use the exact same blueprint.
It's a massive shift. This isn't just a simple grant program where Brussels writes a check and just, walks away.
Absolutely not.
It's a highly calculated strategic architecture. The overarching mission here is interoperability. They want to sever dependencies on non-EU suppliers.
Right.
And essentially build a unified defense technological and industrial base from the ground up.
Exactly. And our mission for you, the listener, is to extract the exact technical requirements the EU is demanding. I mean, if you want a piece of that funding, you need to know this stuff.
Right.
We're going to dissect the complex funding formulas, lay out the critical, really unforgiving timelines you need to know for submission, and analyze the geopolitical realities driving this whole initiative.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. We've got a massive stack of sources today. We're pulling from the dense EDF regulatory blueprints, strategic analyses of the Greece-France Defense Pact, all the way to the very risky realities of tech transfers to Ukraine.
Yeah, and to really grasp the gravity of those technical requirements, we first have to understand that geopolitical backdrop.
Right. Like, why is the EU doing this right now?
Exactly. And who is actually allowed to build these systems?
Let's start with the strategic push. One of our sources focuses on the 2026 Greece-France Defense Agreement.
Right, yeah.
On the surface, that looks like two countries just, signing a piece of paper for the cameras.
Yeah.
But what's the actual engine driving a pact like that?
Well, the engine is operational deterrence. For a nation like Greece, operating in a highly complex region like the Eastern Mediterranean, partnering with France is really about cementing European strategic responsibility.
Because France brings a lot to the table, right?
Oh, absolutely. France brings a massive defense industry and a nuclear deterrent capability. The goal of this pact is to integrate naval and air capabilities so deeply that European forces can project power cohesively.
Meaning they don't have to call in outside help.
Exactly. They want to be able to operate side by side without having to rely entirely on outside allies like the United States to just, manage the logistics or the communications.
Right. So to build that kind of cohesive military power, you inevitably need a cohesive industry building the gear.
Yes.
And this is where the rules of engagement for this 422 million euro EDF call get really interesting.
Yeah.
It cannot just be a lone genius in a garage or even a massive single corporation and win this money.
No, not at all.
The absolute baseline for eligibility mandates a consortium.
Yeah.
You need a minimum of 3 independent applicants from 3 different eligible EU countries.
And the ownership control restrictions are ironclad. I mean, no entity controlled by a non-associated third country can participate.
Wow, 0 exceptions.
Pretty much 0. This all traces back to technological sovereignty. The EU simply refuses to allow external states, even friendly ones, to hold the keys to its future defense intellectual property.
I get the sovereignty aspect for sure, but practically speaking, forming these massive cross-border consortiums sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult.
We looked at a June 2026 report from Houlihan Lokey on joint ventures in European defense. It paints a pretty harsh picture of the business reality for these companies. Why are joint ventures the only way to survive?
Well, there are 2 massive structural roadblocks making joint ventures a practical necessity right now. The first one is regulatory fragmentation.
Going back to the skyscraper analogy.
Exactly. Every single EU member state runs its own entirely distinct procurement process.
Right.
So if a mid-sized German company tries to enter the Spanish defense market without a local Spanish partner, they have to navigate foreign military regulations, language barriers, political preferences.
It's just a wall.
Right. It is slow, it's wildly expensive, and it usually ends in failure.
Okay, so you absolutely need a local guide. What's the second roadblock?
Capital. The money itself.
Wow.
There is a massive scale-up funding gap in Europe right now. Mid-sized defense firms, they're often called mid-caps, are increasingly getting cut off from traditional banking.
Wait.
It's heavily driven by ESG or environmental, social, and governance banking restrictions.
No, I see.
Yeah, many major financial institutions have strict compliance build-ins that basically restrict them from lending to weapons manufacturers.
Wow. So a mid-cap firm simply cannot get a traditional bank loan to, build a new factory.
Exactly. And that's where joint ventures come in. They provide the capital structures these firms desperately need by linking them with larger prime contractors or diverse financial backers who aren't bound by those same restrictions.
It sounds a lot like putting together a heist crew in a movie.
A heist crew. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just have three tech geniuses. You need the tech guy to build the specialized gear. You need the local insider who actually knows the layout of the regulatory maze in their specific country.
Right.
And you need the deep-pocketed financial backer to fund the operation up front.
Right.
If you don't have all three, the heist fails before you even get in the van.
That is exactly how these consortiums function in practice. You need every single role filled by a specialist. And speaking of funding the operation, we really need to look at how this $422 million is actually distributed.
Yeah, because the math behind it is, well, it's heavily engineered.
It is.
Let's unpack the money matrix. The financial architecture is structured as a budget-based, mixed actual cost grant.
Right.
But the baseline funding rates are all over the map, depending on what phase of development you're in.
Right.
Like, if you were doing early-stage studies, like feasibility studies, the EU funds you at 90%.
Which is huge.
Yeah. And design activities sit comfortably between 65 and 100%.
Right.
But then you move into system prototyping, the baseline funding just plummets to 20%.
Yeah, a massive drop.
And then certification goes back up to 80%.
Wait, why does prototyping take such a massive hit?
Because prototyping is the closest step to the actual commercial market.
At that stage, you aren't just sketching ideas on a whiteboard anymore. You are building a product you intend to sell. So, the EU expects the industry to have their own skin in the game.
That makes sense. They aren't going to fully subsidize your final commercial product.
Exactly. However, they've built a very complex bonus system to incentivize specific behaviors, which allows you to stack bonuses on top of that meager 20% baseline.
I have to challenge this approach, though. The bonus system is a convoluted algebra equation.
It really is.
You've got the PESCO bonus, this permanent structured cooperation, the EU's military integration framework, which gives you an extra 10%.
Yep.
Then you have a mid-cap bonus of up to 5%.
Okay.
Then an SME bonus, small and medium-sized enterprises giving up to 5% for local SMEs.
Right.
And finally, the holy grail, a cross-border SME bonus calculated as twice the percentage of the proportion of eligible costs allocated to cross-border SMEs.
I mean,
why force applicants to do this math? Doesn't this just create an administrative nightmare?
oh, it undeniably increases the administrative burden. But you have to look at what the EU is actually buying here.
What do you mean?
They aren't just buying a new radar system, they are deliberately engineering the market. This convoluted algebra is a policy tool.
How so?
It forces the massive prime contractors to pull smaller, innovative SMEs across national borders into their supply chains. It directly combats that scale-up gap we discussed earlier.
Oh, okay. Give me an example.
Let's say a massive French aerospace prime wants to push their prototyping funding rate from a barely viable 20% up to a profitable 45%.
Right.
To get that cross-border SME bonus, they absolutely must hire, say, a tiny AI startup in Estonia and a specialized sensor manufacturer in Greece.
Wow.
They have to cross borders, and they have to fund small businesses. It is literal social engineering for the defense industrial base.
Okay, that completely reorients how I view this. They are paying for the product, but they are using the funding formula to force the industry to just completely rewire itself.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the products. What exactly are they paying to build? Let's transition into the technology requirements, starting with what the sources call the invisible battlefield.
Right, because all this funding means absolutely nothing if the gear can't survive modern electronic warfare.
Absolutely. The highest priority in modern warfare isn't physical armor anymore. A tank is useless if it can't communicate or see.
Yeah, the priority is controlling the electromagnetic spectrum. And space.
Let's look at electronic warfare, or EW. The call allocates a €24 million budget for an Enhanced Cognitive Electronic Warfare System, or CEW.
Which is a very intense blueprint.
Extremely. These systems must operate in multiple frequency bands simultaneously. And there is a specific demand for something called multi-static RF coherence. What exactly is happening on the battlefield when a system has multi-static RF coherence?
So normally, a traditional radar sends out a massive pulse of radio frequency and just waits for the reflection to bounce back from a target, right?
Right, like a flashlight in the dark.
Exactly. The problem is turning on that massive flashlight instantly alerts the enemy to your exact location. You become a target immediately.
Got it.
Multi-static RF coherence changes the game entirely. It means you have multiple remote signals distributed across the battlefield.
So not just one big radar dish.
Right. Maybe a cheap drone sends the pulse while 3 silent, hidden sensors miles away catch the reflection.
So the sensors receiving the data aren't broadcasting their location at all.
Correct. They are completely silent. But to make that work, all those distributed sensors must share a common time and frequency reference with absolute microsecond precision.
Wow.
Yeah, they have to act as one single massive distributed sensor. It allows you to locate targets and jam their signals with vastly greater range, accuracy, and, well, stealth.
And reading to the sources, the EU isn't expecting some startup to invent this entirely from scratch by 2026. Wait, are they piggybacking on existing projects?
Yes, they are building on significant existing momentum. The call specifically ties into the Readiness 2030 goals and precursor projects that are expected to deliver results between 2025 and 2028.
Like which ones?
Projects like Reacted-2, which is developing active electronically scanned array, or AESA antennas.
What's special about AESA?
Well, AESA antennas steer radio waves electronically without physically spinning a dish.
Oh, that makes them incredibly fast.
Very fast and very hard to jam. There's also projects like Scepter and AI-WAS. The EU expects this new CEW system to seamlessly integrate into those exact next-generation capabilities.
That covers the electromagnetic spectrum on the ground and in the air. But all that incredible electronic warfare tech is entirely useless if the satellites feeding them coordinates get jammed.
Exactly. Which brings us to space.
There is a massive €50 million budget dedicated to space navigation, specifically the Galileo Public Regulated Service, or PRS.
Right, because navigation is a critical vulnerability for Europe. The mission here is to build GNSS Global Navigation Satellite System modules.
Essentially, the military-grade GPS that tells a missile or a drone exactly where it is.
Precisely. But these modules have to operate in heavily contested navigation warfare or NavWar environments.
Right, because if your highly advanced multi-million euro smart missile loses its satellite link, it just becomes a very expensive, very dumb flying rock.
Exactly.
The documents state these new GNSS modules absolutely must comply with the Galileo PRS Protection Profile, CMS 46. Think of it like this for you listening. Imagine trying to have a critical whispered conversation with someone in a crowded, blaring nightclub.
And to make it even harder, the nightclub is actively trying to distort your voice. The blaring music is the enemy jamming signal, flooding the area with noise.
Right.
The Galileo receiver has to aggressively filter out massive amounts of that acoustic garbage just to lock onto that one precise, highly encrypted, trusted, whispered signal.
And the expected impact outlined in the call is fascinating. They demand that these anti-jamming antennas and GNSS modules are integrated at the form factor level.
Which means they need to be standardized.
Standardized, physical, plug-and-play components that can be swapped into entirely different weapon systems seamlessly.
It's all about resilience. If the primary signal is jammed, the module needs to seamlessly fuse whatever degraded satellite data it can get with the weapon's onboard physical sensors to just stay on target.
But none of this matters without power. Right?
Obviously not.
You can't run advanced multi-static electronic warfare or encrypted space navigation without electricity.
Which brings us to the physical hardware realities of the call.
Yeah, the energy systems.
Right. There's a €20 million allocation for high-performance energy systems. And the technical demand here shows a fascinating pivot. They want to adapt civilian sustainable energy technology, which aligns directly with the EU Green Deal, and spin it into strict military requirements.
It is the spin-in effect.
Spin effect.
Yeah, the military wants to leverage the billions of euros already spent on civilian green tech. The core goal here is reducing swap, size, weight, and power.
Oh. They want battlefield batteries and generators to be lighter, last much longer, and use renewable energy sources, but they must do this without sacrificing an ounce of performance in extreme freezing or combat environments.
And alongside green energy, there is a massive push for autonomy to reduce the danger to human troops. I noticed the ammunition waste collection platform in the documents.
Yeah, that one is really interesting.
It sounds mundane, but the requirements are wild. It's a highly specific call for an unmanned, robotic platform to collect and dispose of unexploded ordnance and ammunition waste.
Right.
The technical specs demand autonomous operating modes to reduce the human operator's workload. But more crucially, it requires a secure communication suite with a mandatory feature, offline data retention.
Right.
Why is that specifically called out?
Because in a modern contested environment, your communications will be severed at some point. Electronic warfare essentially guarantees it.
Like the Wi-Fi drops.
Right, but way more dangerous. If this autonomous system is out there mapping a minefield or gathering intelligence on unexploded shells, and the data link to the human operator drops, the robot cannot panic and it cannot lose that data.
It'd have to keep working.
Exactly. It must retain all sensor data securely offline, continue its mission autonomously, and upload the intelligence the second the link is reestablished.
So we have these autonomous robots, we have encrypted satellite modules, we have advanced radars. How does all this hardware actually talk to each other?
That's the billion-dollar question.
The call touches heavily on platform integration for major assets like multiple rocket launchers and next-generation fighter systems.
The operative concept here is open architecture. The EU is demanding compliance with strict digital standards, specifically the STANAG 4754 NGVA standard for vehicles.
What is STANAG?
It simply stands for Standardization Agreement within NATO and allied forces.
Okay, what does that standard actually do to a military vehicle?
It essentially turns a tank or a personnel carrier into a massive, heavily armored plug-and-play USB hub.
A USB hub. I love that analogy.
Yeah, under the standard, a vehicle's digital architecture is universal. So a radar built by a Spanish SME, a missile launch system from a French prime, and the vehicle chassis from a German manufacturer can all just click into the same digital dashboard and instantly share data.
Just like plugging a mouse and a keyboard into the same laptop.
Exactly. The expected impact is staggering. A massive reduction in integration and maintenance costs, and total seamless interoperability across all EU forces.
Okay, let's step back. We know what you have to build. We know you need a diverse multinational consortium to build it. And we know how the convoluted algebra of the funding rates forces you to work with SMEs.
Right.
But what happens when the blueprint meets the real world? What are the actual strategic risks of developing this tech? And what are the bureaucratic booby traps of just trying to submit the paperwork?
The strategic risks are immense, and we can actually see them playing out right now. Let's look at the IRS report on defense industrial relations with Ukraine.
Let's do that. And again, just to be clear for you listening, we aren't taking a political side here, just reporting what the sources analyze regarding the defense industry.
Exactly. Ukraine is currently a live laboratory for European defense tech, but operating there is fraught with a very specific type of risk.
The report highlights a massive divide in how companies approach Ukraine. Smaller EU firms, those SMEs from smaller member states, are actually taking massive risks right now.
They are.
They are sending their prototype drones and sensors into the field in Ukraine. They essentially view this as a down payment. They give the tech away for free or cheap to get the combat-proven label, hoping that street cred will win them massive EDF grants later.
But the large established prime contractors are much more hesitant to deploy their newest tech. And the reason is technology transfer risk.
Explain that.
If a prime contractor deploys a next-generation AESA radar or a highly advanced cognitive EW system into an active war zone, there's a very real risk of sabotage, espionage, or outright battlefield capture.
So if an experimental drone with next-gen EU tech gets shot down behind enemy lines, the Russians get to take it apart.
Exactly. The nightmare scenario for these primes is that 40 years of expensive European research and development ends up on a table in Moscow being reverse engineered.
Wow.
Or the IP is lost entirely if the strategic situation on the ground shifts unpredictably. So they face a brutal choice. Do you test your gear in the ultimate proving ground and risk losing your intellectual property to a foreign adversary?
Or do you play it safe?
Right. Keep it in a lab and risk your gear becoming functionally obsolete because it hasn't actually faced real electronic warfare.
It's an incredible gamble. But let's bring it back to the immediate practical hurdles for you, the listener who just wants to win this funding. Let's talk about the bureaucratic risks, because the submission process looks like a literal booby trap.
The submission playbook is entirely unforgiving. I mean, if you miss a single step, your proposal is thrown out regardless of how good the technology is.
Unforgiving is the right word. First, the timeline. The call opens on February 11, 2026. The absolute critical deadline for submission is September 29, 2026, at exactly 17.00.0000000000000. If you hit submit at 17.00 in 1 single second, you're disqualified. The portal physically locks you out.
It is brutal. And proper proposal preparation requires navigating a strict two-step process via the EU Funding and Tenders portal.
Right. What are the steps?
Step 1, Part A, is your online administrative and budget data. That's pretty standard. Step 2, Part B, is your technical description, which is strictly limited to 100 pages as a PDF.
Not 101 pages.
No, strictly 100, along with mandatory annexes like the PRS declaration if you're dealing with the Galileo satellite tech.
But here is the crucial warning we found buried in the documents. You don't just upload the PDF to the portal. You have to submit it in a zip archive. And that archive must be password protected using AES-256 encryption.
This is where so many brilliant consortiums fail.
Really?
Yes. You must encrypt the file perfectly, and then this is the booby trap. You must email the password separately to a specific DFI's email address before the deadline.
Wow. Imagine having world-class intellectual property, a perfectly constructed cross-border consortium, and a brilliant 100-page proposal, and you get disqualified because someone forgot to send the email with the zip file password.
It happens more often than you'd think. And above all, you must not upload classified information to the portal. The portal is for unclassified technical descriptions only.
Right.
If you miss the encryption, forget the password email, or accidentally upload classified data, your proposal is instantly rendered inadmissible. There is no appeals process for administrative errors.
It is literally like navigating a minefield just to hand in the application. But let's say you do everything right.
Okay.
You build the perfect heist crew. You do the algebraic math to get your SAE bonuses. You write a brilliant proposal. You encrypt it. You email the password on time. You pass the rigorous ethics and operational capacity checks, and your project scores above the 37 out of 55 point threshold.
Right.
But the EU just runs out of that 422 million euro budget before they get to your project. You just did all that work for nothing.
Not entirely, actually. That is where the STEP seal comes in.
The STEP seal.
Yeah, it stands for the Strategic Technologies for Europe platform. If your proposal is evaluated successfully, meaning it is technologically brilliant and passes all checks, but it goes unfunded simply due to budget limits, the EU awards you this seal. It acts as a highly coveted stamp of excellence.
How does a stamp help you build a prototype, though?
It allows your consortium to take that fully vetted, EU-approved proposal to other funding bodies, like regional cohesion policy funds or private investment vehicles, without having to start the agonizing evaluation process from scratch. The STEP seal tells investors, the European Union thoroughly audited this technology and approved it. We just ran out of cash.
It's amazing.
It drastically lowers the risk for alternative investors.
That is a remarkably solid safety net. Okay, let's zoom out and summarize what we've covered today in this deep dive. The 2026 EDF call is not just a standard funding opportunity. It is a highly regulated, mathematically complex engine. From demanding multi-static electronic warfare that hides sensors in plain sight, to mandating open plug-and-play digital architecture for total interoperability, this is about building European military independence from the ground up, piece by piece, across borders.
It is about forcefully moving from fragmented national procurement fiefdoms into a unified, technologically sovereign European defense industrial base. The rules are basically designed to make it impossible to succeed in isolation.
Exactly. We started this deep dive talking about a construction site with 27 different blueprints. What the EU is doing here with this 422 million is forcing everyone to use the same blueprint, the same steel, and ideally speak the same digital language.
But as we close, there is a final dynamic here that is really worth pondering. Throughout the call, we saw a heavy emphasis on the spin-in effect, adapting civilian sustainable technologies, like green energy and high-performance batteries, for military use to reduce size, weight, and power.
Right, taking civilian tech and toughening it up for the battlefield.
Precisely. But as the defense sector pumps hundreds of millions of euros into perfecting and ruggedizing these dual-use technologies for extreme, contested, and freezing environments, could that flow reverse?
What do you mean?
Will we see a spin-out effect? Will we see a future where the intense, ruggedized specifications of military technology begin to dictate the design of our everyday civilian consumer electronics and green energy grids?
What?
Will the home solar battery you buy in 10 years be designed fundamentally to survive a battlefield because that's where the R&D money came from?
Now that is a thought to chew on. The military blueprint becoming the blueprint for our own homes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.